Hi, John Prendergast, founder of Therapy and Coaching Success here. You are very welcome to this training today. In this, we're going to look at what it says in the box. What's worth doing when you want to be a successful therapist or coach? We all want to make a difference. We want to get our help out there, and usually we want to make a living, to earn enough to be able to continue to live doing it. That's a beautiful thing, but we're usually incredibly unprepared for the realities of how to do this. Myself and my colleagues, when we finished our training, we all thought that we just had to get out there, put out a little news about it, and that suddenly we'd have clients, we'd be busy, we'd be making the difference in life that we want to make. It just didn't work like that. None of us were actually prepared for how we need to get the message out there. And we didn't know what was the right thing to do. We kept doing the things that we saw other people doing, not realizing that many of them were just desperately flailing about, trying different stuff and not knowing what works. And we kept seeing other people putting out newspaper pieces or business cards or whatever, and we assumed that on day one that's the stuff that we should be doing. The data doesn't necessarily support that. I'm going to take you through the tested data and the results I've gotten actually testing all of these things. Because what happened to me when I started out, I just didn't know what I was doing. I tried lots of stuff, most of it failed, but I tracked what does work. So I've gone back through all of my clients and I've put together that data to look at how many clients came from what source. And I've broken them down in this training as a percentage, and I've worked out what's the return on investment for every one of those sources. So I can share with you what can we stand over and say this has yielded a really good return on investment, whereas something else just hasn't. This is going to be very practical training. Have a pen and paper ready. And at the end of this, I'm going to share with you in online monthly training programs I have that might be of interest to you. But up to that, I am going to train you with a lot of really good stuff today. So do have that pen and paper handy and do work this through with your business in mind as we go. So let's dive on in. The harsh reality is that if we don't allow ourselves to earn a living, we have to do something else to live. The nightmare scenario is that we end up going back into a day job that we don't want just to make a living because we couldn't do it being a therapist or coach. 70% of therapists and coaches give up or go incredibly part-time. If you really want to make a difference, if you want to do this, you're helping a lot of people every week, then this needs to be your profession. It needs to be what you do every week. That can only happen once you work out how to make a living. And part of that, and I say here, allow ourselves to make a living, because some of that is stuff that you need to learn. Some of it is a feeling that we need to have to put ourselves out there. But unless we do it, we need to do something else to live. And that's how serious this is. We need to be that focused on what we're doing here today, because this can be the difference between, are you going to be a full-time professional or a part-time professional, or are you going to have to do something else? And I hate to put it that bluntly, but I was totally unprepared for the realities of being a therapist on the business side when I started. Nearly everybody I work with is. So pen and paper time. Let's get serious about this here today. So we're going to work through where my clients actually came from. We're going to look at the rate of return that I got in terms of any advertising or efforts I had to put out there in order for those clients to find me and come in for help. And we're going to look at what works best from amongst that stuff. We're going to cherry pick one of the things that are easiest to be successful with and look at what are our best options from day one. We're also going to look at my top recommendations. There are certain things I would do differently, and I'm going to explain what those are and why, and show you the supporting evidence for why they should be done differently. So here's where people found me, or where I tried to reach people. The first thing was online listing sites. So that's where it's not a professional organization that you're a member of that you're listed on in this case, but if you're going on to sites where they list lots of different types of therapists or coaches and you're in amongst them. I'm also going to look at professional listings in terms of if you're a member of a counseling organization, for example, if you're a counselor, what's the value of their own site and being listed on it? We're going to look at how successful and useful business cards actually have been. We're going to look at trifold or quadfold brochures, those small ones that fold out. How beneficial are they? Posters. What success did I get with posters? And how useful has my own website been? We're also going to look at word of mouth, referrals from doctors, referrals from other therapists, newspaper adverts, newspaper editorials, and newspaper press releases. The other things we're going to look at on the social media side: Twitter, Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the yellow pages or the golden pages, or however you like to call your newspaper advertising book, your telephone advertising printed book. Most of that is accessed online these days, so I'm including that on the social media and online advertising chunk in there. As well as that, speaking to community groups, holistic fairs, and casual conversations. These are the things that I've gone back and identified as things that either I have tried or that I have really good data on in terms of how many clients have come in. So let's look at the actual number of clients that came in from these things, from business cards. We're going to look at the printed materials, which most of us will start out with. Business cards yield me one client out of every 200 is all, so 0.5%. Those small brochures, the trifold brochures, or the wee flyers that lots of people will put out, they yield 3.4%. And posters, 1%. Now, as we go through these numbers, I want to explain that not all of these are things I've done to the same level. I didn't do much with posters. I used them at the start. They're probably going to yield more than 1% overall if I kept using them, because we're looking at data over a number of years here. So what I've done to work out from that what's the actual value is I've worked out the return on investment. While I might only get one client in every 200 because of business cards, that's 21 times the return on investment. So for every dollar I spent getting business cards done, $21 in revenue. In terms of clients coming in and actually working with me, $21 of return was what I saw for that. So while it's a very small percentage, it's well worth doing. It's not going to make or break a practice. And that's true as well for most of these. Now, trifold brochures do an awful lot better for me. 59 times the spend. So if I spend $1 getting my brochures printed and put out there, 59 times that will come back to me. So $59 back for the one out. Incredibly well worth doing. But again, they're not going to make the biggest difference because there's only so many places you can put them. There's not that many people who will act quickly on them. But there's certainly something that should be in the repertoire. They'll pay it back, definitely, as long as we're doing it well. And we have to get the message right in all of these things. And I'll explain a little about that in a moment. But on posters, I just want to let you know, I had a return of 37 to 1. So it was well worth doing. It was a lot of effort, and I went on to other things. I probably should have maintained using posters more in the early days, but I was trying lots of things and looking for what was working best. So with this, if you added these up, you're just under 5%. So 1 in 20 of my clients is all that I brought in by using these printed materials. They're worth doing. But 1 client in 20 is not enough for me to be a professional therapist. It's not enough to actually make the difference I need it to make. So as such, I would say all of these are a relatively low priority compared to some of the other stuff that's out there. But yet, isn't this the stuff that we typically do at the start? Nearly every therapist seems to think, right, I need brochures, I need business cards, or I need posters. They help. They're not going to be the thing that makes the big difference. So if we look at the first online options that most people tend to look at, their own website. So my website has brought in 11.7% of all my clients. At the start, it brought in none because it wasn't being found very easily. I hadn't worked out how to get the message right on it. I hadn't gotten it to where it was connecting with people. So these days, it produces 17% of my clients. This is the average over the last number of years as I was working that out, and now at the point where it's working very well. But 11.7% of all my clients have come because I have a website. And again, people tend to think I need to have a website, then I'm in business, then people will come to me. Not really. This is years of work to get to the point where it was coming up past single digits. So while a website is very useful, it's not necessarily a first priority. We need to be looking here, what will find us the most clients in the easiest, least expensive and quickest way first? How do we get that start? Because nothing else will start running until we start to see clients. We can't get word of mouth running until we start to see clients. So we're looking for what's the best thing to do, and a website is brilliant, but it's not a quick fix at the start. And I really want to be clear on that. Online listing sites. So this is where I'm listed on somebody else's website where they're listing lots of different types of therapists. Typically you'll be paying for these services, but not always. 1.6% of my clients come because of that or have come because of that. And then the professional listing site. So because I'm a certain type of therapist and I'm listed on the organization's website for that type of therapy, that brings me 1.4%. But again, some of these are things I've been on a long time. Some are things I've gotten very good at and are producing better. So what's the actual return on investment? That's what we really want to see to balance it out and see what are the best options. Yellow Pages, just to put it in there, by the way, 0 clients. Now, I didn't use Yellow Pages. This is based on a good friend of mine who was telling me that they have spent an awful lot on Yellow Page advertising, or that's phone book advertising, and seen 0 results from it. And I've heard that from a lot of people. I'm putting it in there just because I think it's worth knowing, because a lot of people will typically look at that and think, is it worth doing? But if we look at the return of investment here, my own website, because it's so cheap to set up and run, 227 to 1, the single highest return on investments I've ever seen. But remember, key thing here is, while that looks like a huge number, and it is, it's not at the start. That website has been up for years now, and that's what's allowing it to perform so well. So it shows that it is worthwhile, but this is a long-term strategy. Your website is not something to set up at the start and think that's going to make you. If you have the time and leisure to set it up at the start, please do, but don't rely on it in order to be busy. If we look then at the return on the online listing sites, 120 to 1. This is a phenomenal result, and this mostly comes from one single listing site. I'm on lots of them, most of them perform incredibly badly. The average for most of the ones I've paid money to is about 2 or 3 to 1 is all in return on investment. And that's just not worth it by comparison. The one that really has done the most here is one that's actually free. I'm just going to tell you what that one is. It's whatclinic.com. I highly recommend them. You're not going to get enough people from them to make or break your practice with a free listing, but you'll get a few clients for free during the year, and it's free. So that's what's really dragged up this number to 120 to 1 in terms of return on investment. Professional listing sites, so the organizations I'm a member of, that I'm on their website and I'm listed with, typically 5 to 1. Very poor return on investment. And being a member of these organizations, if you were doing it just for the advertising point, probably wouldn't be worth it from my point of view with them. At least not for the ones I've been a member of. Most of them, I'm paying a few hundred a year in membership, and I'm not paying directly to be on their website, but it's a perk of that. It's not really paying back very well in terms of how many clients will I see. Now, I'm a member of these organizations because I want to support them. I believe what they're doing. I sign up to their professional ethics, etc. The membership isn't predicated on, am I going to get clients back or not? But a lot of people will look at, should they join another organization in order just to get that more exposure. The return on investment is very poor compared to many of the other things that we can do that will yield a better result. But I'd go on there. If you're a member of an organization, I'd make sure that I availed of whatever service they offered in terms of having a listing, because it does bring in clients. And then the yellow page is the return on investment. The word that my friend uses and the words I keep hearing is disaster. So telephone book advertising seems to be well and truly dead. If you know somebody who's getting results with it, I'd love to know what it is that they're doing that's making it work. But I'm just putting this in here in terms of the data that's come back to me. Just not worth doing. So moving on from those first online options and coming into print media. A lot of people will say print media is dead. It is absolutely not. For my first couple of years in practice, the only advertising I was doing was in local newspapers. That was what was bringing in all the clients I was getting there. I was turning over enough to be a professional therapist. I was earning enough so I could keep going. And more importantly, I was getting to help a lot of people. I was developing my skills. I was gaining expertise. And I was making the difference that I wanted to make in life. So don't discount print media. Standard newspaper adverts, ones that look like an advert just somewhere in the paper, bring in less than 3% of my clients. Newspaper editorials, on the other hand, where I have 200 to 300 words where I can talk about an issue, brought in over 20% of all my clients to date. Now, I did a lot of newspaper advertising in my first 2 years, and I haven't been doing it in the last few. So again, we will look at return on investment to kind of get a sense of how valuable is that overall. Because in my first couple of years, 90% plus of my clients were from newspaper advertising, mostly the editorials doing the work there. And then press releases, 1.6%. So it might look small, but compared to the cost involved, it can be quite good. Newspaper adverts, the standard ads, returned 2 to 1. You might think, well, I put in $1, I get $2 back. That sounds great. But what that amounts to when we have to actually do the work is a very poor equation. Let's say that we're getting paid $100 by a client. We get that client through newspaper advertising, so our return is 2 to 1. Half of what we have taken in has to be spent to get there. So $50 out of $100 has to be spent to make that 50. So now we're working at however many hours that was for half what we initially planned. So a 2 to 1 return on investment is great if it's a scalable product that you don't have to do any work for. If you have to sit down with an hour and work for somebody, you've just taken a 50% pay cut if it's costing you, so that you're getting a 2 to 1 return on investment. Newspaper editorials, they gave me a return on investment of 14 to 1. Now, this is a figure from all of my advertising, all of my editorials over a number of years. I got very good at editorials as I went through. I began to understand that it's not just how much you put out there, it's do you say the right things to the right people in a way that really helps them. And to drive that point home, actually, I worked with a client who had a regional newspaper column which was read by 150,000 people a week, or at least the paper was read by 150,000 people a week. It had 3 million hits per month on the website for that newspaper, and he had almost no clients coming in. The only thing that we worked on and changed was how he put the message in the newspaper. He talked about the same things, but in a different way that connected with the needs of the person who was suffering. We made that change in November of that year, and in December, which is usually a nosedive month in terms of people taking action, he was seeing a huge increase in clients. So it really drives home the point, no matter what type of advertising or where you're putting a message, you need to make sure it resonates with the client and what it is that they're suffering, so that you can get them to realize you help them with their life, not just use labels and categories of help and stuff like that. It needs to be more practical than that. But once I'd worked that part out, my return on investment with newspapers went up to 25 to 1. So this is the overall, while I was learning to get good at it, plus a little bit at the end while I was good at it, but that can be a much higher return on investment. And press releases, 53 to 1. The difference is, newspaper editorials I could put in every single month. So if there was an awful lot of clients coming in, because every single month I was getting it in, there were only a couple of times when I actually put press releases out. That was a mistake. I should have put out a lot more press releases. At 53 to 1 return on investment, I should have been really pushing the envelope there and trying to get a lot more of them in. But live and learn. Like I said, I knew none of this when I started. I had to learn the hard way. I got down to the point where I had less than 100 left in my bank account at the worst of it. I didn't know, was I going to be able to continue to be a therapist and make the difference I want, or was I going to have to go back and get a day job just for money? That would have been a nightmare scenario for me. So it's worth noting, the return on investment in newspaper advertising is quite brilliant. You could certainly be a successful therapist just on newspaper advertising once you get good at it. So worth noting, worth keeping in mind. So the next category we want to look at is referrals, where somebody else is telling people about us. And the first one we look at there is word of mouth. 24.7% of all my clients to date have come from word of mouth. Now that figure includes at the start when there is zero word of mouth, and it takes quite a while for word of mouth to build. Typically, when I ask this question of therapists in seminars or in online forums, the answer that comes back is, if a therapist has been moderately busy, typically it'll take 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years maybe, before word of mouth mounts to an appreciable part of their practice. But yet we assume we'll see a few clients and things will take off like wildfire. That will depend on what you're doing. If you do weight loss, if you do stop smoking, the people who get success, they'll be out there telling everyone how brilliant you are, and word of mouth will be quicker. It still won't be as quick as you probably expect, but it will be quicker. If you do something that's fun or that's cool, word of mouth spreads. If, like me, you help people with survivors of clerical sex abuse, people who have chronic anxiety, people who have chronic depression, very few of them talk about it in the same way. You don't get the word of mouth. It builds more slowly. It does still build. But even in that, with the category I'm in, 24.7% of all my clients have come because of word of mouth. And that's up to about 36%, I think, these days, if I look at, say, the last 12 months advertising, because word of mouth will expand year to year, which means less money and less time needs to be spent on advertising, because there's more people coming in without you making that effort because of the work you've already done. Doctors who refer to me, 1.6% of my clients come for that. And I'm not in the medical establishment, by the way. It's not a case of they're referring internally within the health system or anything like that. It's just that some doctors are aware of my existence, and if they have somebody who they think I can help, they'll often mention my name to them. So it's a fairly casual level of referral there. But still, 1.6% of my clients doesn't cost me anything. And fellow therapists, so other therapists who just are aware, oh yeah, you handle this, and they send me people because they know that. 4.1%. And the return of investment on these, there's no spend on any of them. So this is all free. Isn't that pretty cool? That we're looking at close to 30% without having to spend money there. Now the thing is, it takes time to get known with these. I didn't target doctors in terms of I didn't go to their surgeries, I didn't try to get in front of them and explain what I do, and I haven't done that with other therapists either. This is something that will grow with time. All of this is essentially, if you start seeing helping people, getting that help out there, those people talking about the results, then all of this grows naturally by itself. But it's not something you can expect at the start. And I know it's heartbreaking. A lot of people expect word of mouth will take off for them at the start. It's a very tiny percentage of people for whom that's the case. But isn't it nice and comfortable to think that you don't have to spend a cent? In due course, you keep at this. You keep helping people. You keep getting your message out there, making the difference you want to make in life, and also, hopefully, getting paid for it as you go, and it just gets easier. This is something that I didn't realize at the start that's made my life a chunk easier as it went. So looking at social media, Twitter has brought in 0.1% of my clients. It's worth knowing that when I was advertising on Twitter in Ireland, Twitter did not allow me to target a very local area. So it's much more useful in most other countries. However, Twitter limits us to 140 characters. We're not really able to say very much in that space, so it is a fairly limited place to advertise. Facebook has brought in 16% of all my clients. Now, in my first few years, I wasn't on Facebook. I hated the thought of being on social media. I literally had a tension and a discomfort in my gut anytime I thought about going on there. It took a lot to get me on there. Best thing I ever did, because Facebook is brilliant for reaching and helping people. So this 16% includes the years I'm not on there, plus the years I've been using it a lot. So it's quite a big thing. And we'll look at the return on investment in a minute. But I've also looked at Google Plus and been on there. Just 0.3% of my clients came from Google Plus. The numbers just didn't add up. It was obvious it wasn't going to be a big player for me, so I dialed back on that fairly early on. LinkedIn brings in very small numbers, 1.6%. But it's really worth knowing that my clients, in terms of the clinical work I do, are not business people. They're just the average person. Some of them will be in business, some of them won't be. So LinkedIn is not a good place to target them. If I was offering a business-to-business service, then LinkedIn would be a very good place for me to be. But for me, for clinical work, 1.6%. And then YouTube, no clients. But YouTube is quite useful because I host videos on it, which then help my website, which I can embed in other social media. There's a value to YouTube that's hidden. But in terms of clients coming in directly because they saw me on YouTube, never. So the return on investment on Twitter, 2 to 1. So again, that's a 50% pay cut if we're having to spend that much, that we're only seeing $2 back for every dollar out. So if we get $2 in income, that we have to pay one of that back out in advertising, not a good equation. Facebook, 47 to 1. And this is based on me not knowing how to use it at the start as well as knowing how to use it later. So that number can be much better. Google Plus, I didn't spend anything on Google Plus. I used it purely organically. LinkedIn, I didn't spend any money on LinkedIn. Again, if I was targeting business people, I very much would have. YouTube, there was no money spent there. It's used just as a hosting area for what I use it elsewhere. Sure, people can find it on YouTube, but it hasn't amounted to any real following. And Google Ads, I spent quite a lot of money on Google AdWords. It is very complex. Unless you're trained in it or skilled in it, my advice is just don't use it. It is too complex for somebody who isn't technically minded. I am not very technically minded. I did my best on it. It just wasn't paying it back. Again, 2 to 1. That means for every $2 that comes in, $1 had to be spent already in advertising. That was a 50% pay cut. If you're skilled in Google Ads, if that's something that you're comfortable with, it actually can perform well better than that. But for the average therapist and coach, if you're not an IT professional, or if you're not somehow skilled in specifically Google AdWords, it's really not a place I recommend to be at all. Okay, so looking at the last few places, speaking to community groups got 1.1% of my clients. It's something I didn't do very much. I should have done a lot more of it. Holistic fairs, 0.3% of my clients. And conversations that I didn't intend to have. And this is really quite surprising because that's 5.3%. That's a fairly big number when you look at the numbers we've been getting in this breakdown. What this is are people who just happen to ask me what I do for a living. To give you two examples, when I bought a car a few years back, I had to tell them what my profession was, etc. I got into a conversation about that. Somebody in the garage knew somebody who needed my help. A client ended up coming along. A couple of years ago, a gentleman called to my door to sell me a telephone line. And in the course of getting my details for that, he asked me what I did. I explained that one of the things I did was psychotrauma therapy, and I worked a lot with soldiers with PTSD. He had a friend who was a former soldier who really had come home changed. That was a client. I'm not a guy who goes out there and tries to tell people, this is what I do, listen to what I do. I'm not trying to have these conversations. These are accidental. And they only come up when somebody else asks me what I do in a way that I have to explain. This isn't people at a party saying, what do you do for a living? I don't get into that stuff there. But these accidental conversations yield 5.3% of my clients. Isn't that pretty amazing that that's actually yielding more than the initial print stuff we looked at, the flyers, brochures and cards? It puts a context on, we really need to look at where are the people coming from. But in terms of return on investment, speaking to community groups, had 83 to 1 return on investment because there's almost no investment. I sent out some letters, I made a few phone calls, and I drove to where it was. So it's really only envelopes, paper, stamps, printing and petrol. And it's a great place to reach people. Last time I spoke to a community group, about 50 people, 8 people wanted to be clients at the end of that. So a wonderful way of very quickly getting clients, and something that we don't do enough of. And I know a lot of people aren't confident to stand up in front of community groups. Could you be more confident if it made the difference between being a therapist or coach and not being a therapist or coach? If you thought about what's the difference it will make to somebody who needs to hear that message, what are they suffering? How much discomfort would you be willing to stand to go and speak in front of a group of people if it might relieve somebody else's suffering? I find this a great way to get myself motivated to go out there and speak more. These days, I'm pretty happy and comfortable to speak in public. That was not the case. 6 years ago, when I was still suffering chronic anxiety and depression, my worst nightmare was standing in front of people and speaking. So find ways to get into your comfort zone around that if you can, because it is a brilliant way of very quickly seeing clients coming in. Holistic fairs are something that happens in my area where there could be all sorts of holistic therapists. There could be some other stuff there too. I tried a number of these and the return on investment was 13-1. So it was worth doing. If I was starting out again, there was one convenient, I'd probably do it, because what this means is for every $13 that comes in, only $1 has already had to be spent getting the word out by going to a holistic fair. It paid itself back quite enough, so I'm quite happy that that's a useful strategy. And in the conversations, well, there's no spend in the conversations. It's just something that when they happen, sometimes it will yield a result. And by the way, whenever I go to see my doctor, he's always asking me about PTSD and psychotrauma and taking cards, and every now and then somebody comes from that. So it's surprising just where that comes in, and that's counted actually in the figure for doctors' referrals earlier. So these are the actual returns. So what would it really come down to in terms of what should we be doing first? The first thing is to be clear on what you help, and this is absolutely vital. I mentioned earlier that newspaper column that wasn't yielding results, even though there were 150,000 people a week reading that newspaper. The guy wasn't clear on what he helped. He was clear on what he was. So let's say if he was a counsellor, he was talking about counselling the whole time rather than what does counselling help. Get your message about what is it that you actually help. What's the problem? What's the symptom? What's the issue that you help people with? Be clear on that, be consistent on that, and then everything can yield a result. My business cards now yield 10 times the results that they used to, because I've worked out how to get the message right even in something as small as a business card. It is absolutely vital that we have the right message. Then you need to get it out there any way that you're comfortable using. If you're thinking, oh my God, Facebook is the place to go, but I'm not comfortable on Facebook, don't hold back. Put it in newspapers, get your brochures, get your flyers out, speak to community groups. Do all the stuff that you're comfortable to do. Then, if you've got the time and the headspace and the leisure, look into Facebook. But too many people, they hold back going, well, this isn't the best thing to do and I'm not comfortable doing the best thing, so I'm going to just wait until I am. That's the wrong way to go, in my opinion. Get the help out there, whatever level you can. Every single thing that we've seen on here, except for I think the news or the telephone book advertising, has yielded some clients. Let's get out there and get some clients, build our confidence, build our expertise, get some income in, and then look at when we're ready to take the next step. But go with what you're comfortable with, and remember that you have to get that message clear. I know a gentleman in London who took out a UK-wide national advertising campaign where he spent £500,000. And he is in the health, wellness, fitness sector. £500,000 was spent in that campaign. He didn't get a single new client. And he says himself it's because at the time he wasn't thinking about the message. He was more thinking about how do I get stuff out there. So draw back from it a little bit, just to the point of what do you actually help? Who's your ideal client? If somebody is suffering, what are they suffering? That means you're the right person for them. This is what you want to get out into the world. Then do get that out whichever way you're comfortable with, and grow your comfort so that you can use more ways that are even better. And realize that word of mouth only comes when you are seeing clients. If you're not already out there seeing clients, you can't have word of mouth. And unless you have a steady flow of clients coming in, the word of mouth will not be spreading quickly for most of us. So we have to make that initial step. We have to be clear on the message. We have to get it out there. I don't mind what method you use. Put the right message out. Talk about the problems people have. Put it out in whatever way you're comfortable with. That's what will allow word of mouth to start building. And this is really important. We can't just wait until we're better. We can't wait until somehow we're going to be able to deliver better value to people. We get to be better by doing stuff now. Every client you see grows your expertise. On day one, every therapist and coach I've ever met has been able to deliver value for money. You don't have to solve every problem on the first day. Get out there, help with what you can. This will make you better as you go. So we're going to look at the best non-scalable results I've gotten in terms of things that we can do which are not inside our control as much as some of the other stuff. And by this I mean when we use something, for example, like online listings. So this is things like whatclinic.com. I can't influence how many people go to whatclinic.com very directly. I could spend advertising money to bring people to their website, but that's kind of counterproductive because if I could bring them to me to begin with, that would be a quicker jump. So there's no real benefit to me trying to influence how many people come to these things. They do the job they do. That's outside our control. We can't scale it up or down. So if we have a waiting list of a month, it doesn't matter. It's not like we can stop that from being shown to people. If we have no clients, it's not like we can get more people to see it. And that's what I mean by scalable or non-scalable. Where can we put the message? More if we need to, or less if we're overbooked. So at the start, we're not going to be overbooked. So we should be thinking about the online listings. We should also be thinking about press releases. At 53 to 1, press releases are certainly something put out there. But they're generally non-scalable in terms of you might get 3 or 4 press releases in a year into a local newspaper if you're very good at it. It's not something that you can put it out every week or every month. And we should use as many as we can, but we need to realize it's not going to make or break our practice because it's not going to be regular enough. Absolutely get it out there. It's a brilliant return on investment. And then speaking to community groups is also not something that's very scalable. There's only so many groups in our area and we're not going to be able to keep speaking to them month after month after month. You might get in there once or twice a year. So while there might be quite a bit of it that you can do, it's not something that you can really scale up and down as completely as we'd like. So things that are outside of our control to a certain extent would be these 3. I would think they're certainly well worth doing. The best ones in terms of things that are scalable. So Facebook text post. If I put out a post that's mostly text, where the text is providing the information, there might be a picture with it, I will typically see an 80 to 1 return when I do this. Now I'm very good at this. I'm not going to guarantee that you're going to see those same results at the start, but I will typically, for every dollar spent, get $80 return on investment there. And this is something that's entirely scalable. If I had no clients next week, I could post today and I could put more money behind that so more people get to see it so I can scale it up. If I have, as I do at the moment, a several week waiting list, I'm probably not going to be advertising on there. And in fact, at the moment, I'm not spending a cent on Facebook because until my waiting list comes down to a point where I'm beginning to think, okay, I need to start advertising again, I'm not spending anything. So Facebook is very scalable in that respect. So text posts, 80 to 1 return on investment these days. Facebook video posts, I'm seeing typically 122 to 1 return on investment. Now these are way higher than the figures I've shown you earlier for what Facebook has done over the entire time of my practice, because those figures include the first few years where I just wasn't on Facebook, where all the clients were coming from other sources. This is the return on investments that I'm currently getting on campaigns on Facebook. So I'll absolutely be looking at these as the best scalable results I've ever gotten. Newspaper ads and editorials, typically I'm getting 25 to 1. Now that I've gotten good at it, I know where in the newspaper it should be, what I need to say in it, etc. Once I've got that psychology of connection layered in nicely, 25 to 1. So worth doing, but you know what? If I'm getting all the clients I need from Facebook, I don't advertise in newspapers. And that's where I am at the moment. But I know that if Facebook disappeared in the morning, I'd be back to newspaper editorials and adverts, and I'd still be a professional therapist seeing all the clients I wanted. It would just be costing me a bit more to do it. But if I get $100 in client work, it's only cost me $4 to get that message out in the newspapers. So per $100 coming in, $4 going out, would that be a good equation for you? It's a pretty good result. Now I've separated this down a bit because LinkedIn campaigns are delivering 33 to 1 when I'm in a different sector aiming at business clients. For my therapy clinic for anxiety, trauma, depression, which are the 3 things I work with, that's not something that I put on LinkedIn because it doesn't appeal any more to business people than it does to the average public. But when I'm doing something else where I am looking to make a connection with business people, I will absolutely be using LinkedIn there, and I will see a very good return on investment, 33 to 1. But it's a lot more effort on LinkedIn. If I want to communicate with a business on LinkedIn, I expect it to take longer. I expect more back and forth in the process. It's much quicker and easier for me to reach the average man or woman in the street using Facebook. But I just put this in here just so that those of you who might be business coaches or maybe massage therapists who go in and do an on-site massage service for businesses, or people who are doing employee assistance programs or stress management into businesses, there's a lot of options for therapists and coaches to take what we already do into a business setting. If that's you, LinkedIn campaigns can be very worthwhile. But I just want to make the distinction between the average therapist and coach who is aiming for the man or woman in the street who has just normal lifestyle issues or things that aren't in any way related to just being in business. LinkedIn is not the place to be. I think it was 1.6% of my clients came from LinkedIn for the therapy side. So if you're on the therapy side, leave LinkedIn to one side is my advice. Okay, so what would I do now? If I was starting out today and I needed lots of clients, and for me lots of clients would be 15 to 20 clients a week, I'd get posting on Facebook as the number one things I'd do. It's free to get on there. I would open a Facebook business page. That's free to do as well. And I would start posting about what's the problems people have if they need my help. And I would put a little money behind that. Maybe 5 or 10 a day just to get that message out there. Very quickly with that, I can see a turnaround in terms of number of clients coming in. It is a really, really best way to go. You need to be a little bit comfortable with it. It's not that complex, but get that message right on there and Facebook can really give you a tremendous return. The next is I will also be getting ads and editorials into papers. I'd be negotiating to make sure that I had editorial space. I'd be putting it in my local newspapers because I'd want a lot of clients at the start. As I go down the line, I might drop some of these things for what's the easier one for me, or what's the one I'm more comfortable in, or what's the one that's working best for me. But at the start, I would hit the big options. I do them all. I spend a small amount of money on each, and I try and get some clients in. As I got those clients in, once I got to make that difference and help people, I should also be seeing some more income coming in, which means it now becomes easier to judge how much advertising can I afford, can I spend a bit more, see a lot more clients, and therefore make that bigger difference and also make that win for myself of a better income. I'd also speak to local groups. This is absolutely huge at the start. If you're willing to speak to local groups, you are going to be able to give them a sense of you. They'll see you, they'll hear you, they'll get an idea for what expertise you have, for how much you know about what you've done. That's really powerful. People connect to people. In person is just wonderful. So I'm really, really advising, if you need to see a lot of extra clients, start speaking to local groups as quickly as you can. I would put up a website and I'd put a blog on it. And that can be a very simple thing. A one-page website that gives people the information they need will outperform the shiny whistles and bells websites that don't give people the information they need. So make sure that if somebody wanted your help, they could actually find everything they need on the front page of your website, and put a blog somewhere on it. The blog is what drags your website up the listings. If you go onto Google and you Google what I do in the towns I do it, I am on the first page of Google. The reason for that is my blog is full of me talking about those problems, but yet I've never written anything for the blog. Whenever I post something on Facebook, I just copy paste it into the blog. Whenever I write an editorial in a local newspaper, I copy paste it into the blog. It just means I end up with the right stuff on the website. This isn't going to make a big difference at the start, but at the start I'd begin it because it will build little bit by little bit by little bit, and it'll be making a big difference down the line. Next thing, I'd put out press releases. I would send them to every local newspaper, every media outlet, explaining who I am, what I do, what's the benefits I try and help people achieve, and how to get in touch with me. Press releases really, really were worthwhile at the start. My first press release, my first week, I got 6 new clients. It was probably the best thing I ever did because it proved that newspaper advertising worked. And then I was confident enough after a while when I realized I really needed to push myself in terms of putting my message out there, so I knew I could go back to the newspapers, which I'd seen some results in. And that's what made me a professional therapist, the fact that I was able to keep pushing with that, working out how to get that message right, and I saw enough clients that I was just able to keep going. And the other thing I'd do is I would put out those brochures in key places, those small trifold or fourfold brochures or flyers. They're worth doing. They're not going to make a huge difference, but they will paying themselves back very significantly. The big things though, Facebook and editorials in the newspapers and speaking to local groups, those 3 things would be the things I would really focus on first if I were starting again tomorrow. Now if you'd like some help doing all this, I just want to let you know that I do have training available on a lot of different topics. Newspaper advertising, where in the newspaper should you be? I've tested all the different pages. I've tested what type of message goes in there. I've tested just what works and what doesn't. All of that I've got training on in there. Brochures, how to get your brochure to return many times higher return on investment than what a typical one does. How to get the psychology of connection right as you're putting that together. We also have training on getting your fee right, which is really important. Unless you can earn enough by helping people, then what you're saying is you're going to have to get a different job. We need to reality check your fee, make sure that you're comfortable with it, make sure that it serves your client. There's a full training on that. There's another full training on press releases. There's a really good training on how to get and to use testimonials. I was an absolute disaster at this when I started. I didn't want to use testimonials. I was uncomfortable about it. I didn't understand how they worked. And because of that, a lot less people got help. If I had been willing to get testimonials and to do that ethically, and we deal with that in there, and if I'd known how to put them out there to get best results, a lot more people would have gotten help, and that would have meant a lot more income for me at the start when I desperately needed it, when times were very tough. There was a great training on that in there. There's a training on business cards, how you can get many times better return on your business cards, how you can keep them active, how you can get people to actually pass them on and just do way better on them. Another module on alliances and referrals, how you can get other therapists to actually send you clients that they know are right for you and vice versa without competing with each other. That's all clients for free just by having a few conversations. And big module on ethical larger incomes. Every therapist and coach I've met so far has had some way that they could make an offering that would help a lot more people, whether it's an online course or via webinar or Facebook Live or by doing group work. There have always been options. We work through what they might be. All of these are really practical trainings where we really do the exercises to work out what's the best stuff, what's the stuff that will make the difference within this for you and show you exactly how to deploy that in the best ways. There's training on Skype and other stuff. This is just a random handful of the stuff that's in this training. It's a monthly training. You get awesome training every single month. There's no contract. You don't have to sign up for any length of time. You can sign up, you can leave whenever you want. It is just $19.50 a month. The first 12 months of this would cost you over $1,200 if you were to buy the stuff that's there on my website. And for those who join up now, you're going to get a special deal where you're going to get for your first training a complete 3-part course I've put together on how to get your bio right. And your bio is not about you. Your bio is about how can you help someone else. My bio brings in over $10,000 a year in new work. And I track that by people just coming in and I ask them, why are you here? The people will say, I saw your bio on this website or I saw the write-up about you on that website. I tick the box for they're here because of the bio. Over $10,000 a year. And this is passive income. I don't have to make any effort in these bios. I'm not pushing them. I'm not advertising them. I'm not putting money behind them. I get them because I'm a member of an organization or I get them for free because I'm on a website somewhere. It makes a phenomenal difference. But the really cool thing in this complete 3-part course is it takes you through the detailed psychology of connection. What do you need to be saying? How do you say it? And we look at all the stuff that we all discount and think there's nothing special about me. There's always stuff that when we present it will really help somebody to have faith and have hope and to reach out for help. That is on my website as a standalone course. Its normal price is $297. It's on special offer at $197 at the moment. But you get that as your first module, which is just $19.50 in the first month as you come in. All the training is recorded and available for 12 months. So it's not a case of you have to be online at any particular time. If you're away on holidays, it's waiting for you there when you come back. And the beauty of this is you're getting one full training per month. So you can use the bio one, the complete 3-part course the first month. Get your bio right, get that out there. Next month you get another training with time to implement it. So as you're doing all the stuff you're going to be doing anyhow, you can take a little bit of time, work through something that we've seen works. All of this is based on things that we've had results with, that we've seen work, and they're all really practical trainings. Like I said, there's no contract. This stuff is good enough so I don't need to have a contract with it. You can come and go as you like. It is just $19.50 a month. And it is phenomenal stuff. You basically are getting something every single month that I have put together because I know it works. So I really hope that you'll join me on this. You can just click the link below and you will have immediate access to that first month. So thanks very much for being with me here today. I hope you've worked this stuff through with pen and paper, and I hope that you're thinking about implementing this. How can you actually get your help out to more people? There is no job in the world that is better than being a therapist or coach. We get to help people have better lives, and when we get to see people living those better lives, it is wonderful. Wouldn't it be great to allow ourselves to make the income that we want, to have a comfortable life, support our families, and not be worrying about money, and doing the job that we want in life? I really hope you think it is. I really hope you'll join me in this training, and thank you so much for being with me here today.